Hi there. Welcome to this afternoon's topic, episode 11 it is. Today is going to be our Unity case study about the New York Marathon. This is another one of those extensions of just when you thought you couldn't have enough intercom, we're going to cover the entire city. You know, we don't just want to cover an arena. We just don't want to cover two arenas. We want to cover city blocks, an entire city. And we're going to have a good time today with Brian from CP Communications, who has been dealing with this, or did, I should say. And of course, we'll be joined later by Jess Heimlich from Unity, or I should say DCS Communications, and he'll share with us some continued best practices from our earlier conversation. But before we do, welcome Mac, welcome Pete. Pete, why don't you walk us through some Q&A procedures for today and how we can get involved?
Sure. Well, we want to sort of give you an answer first, and then you have to come up with the question. That's the way it really should work out. So if that doesn't work out, on your right-hand side of your desktop, there is a pull-down menu that says questions, and you can type the questions in there. They do not show up necessarily for everybody on there. So we're going to vet the questions and pass them on to Brian and Jess as we go on. We do have somebody watching those questions, and if you're asking a question, it's not related to our presentation, they'll probably just answer it, like if you want to know if you're having a problem with the webcast. So I think we're in pretty good shape. We're going to hand it over to Brian. Let me make sure that Brian has his sharing working. Brian, where are you? Brian, ready, panelist. Okay, you've got the sharing.
Hey, you got it now. Thanks, Pete. Hey, everybody, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate everybody taking the time. Kind of go through a little bit of a case study of the New York City Marathon. The premise of basically what I'm going to be talking about is a couple of the reasons that we switched out of more traditional communications. I've got some slides and some stuff to show you guys about why it was so important for us to make the transition and how we can then grow with this particular technology into the future. So I'm gonna put up my slideshow here. All right. Hey, where'd it go?
Now you're sharing the desktop now. There you go.
There we go. Now, we'll just go through a little bit of case study. For those that don't know me, I work for CP Communications. I spent roughly 15 years on the road as an audio engineer, A1, A2, comms, you name it. I've tried to do it. The last 6 years I spent exclusively working for CP. My technical title is Account Executive Systems Engineer, and I work on designing and implementing a lot of the audio video communication systems for all the various large-scale events that CP is involved in. So we'll get into the New York City Marathon. Traditionally, up until about 3 years ago, the New York City Marathon was covered with microwave links for the cameras throughout the city, as well as traditional radio communications. In New York City, as time has gone on, it's become more and more difficult to transition away from or to utilize traditional radio comms based upon spectrum availability. The traditional spaces you would use, channels 14 and 19, 14, 15, and 16, you're not going to get any part of because that's reserved for New York City Emergency Services, the FDNY, NYPD, EMS. If you look at a scan, which I'll show you momentarily, the lower half is all reserved for all the outbound high-power transmits, and then the upper 3 megahertz is all the inbound receives. So on the scan, you'll see it looks like there might be some clean spectrum, but as we all know, that's a moving target. Channel 17 includes a lower power TV station and also includes some private and commercial land mobile radio. Channel 18 is just unavailable because it's completely full, as well as channel 19, which is private and commercial land mobile radio as well, including the One Voice Consortium. So you can see here on the screenshots that I was able to kind of grab, 14, 15, and 16, at least the first 3 meg of the channel is pretty well full, as well as 17 and 19 have some space, but when you're doing a show of this scale, it does take up quite a bit of that spectrum moving forward. So here's a kind of a block diagram of the more traditional side of things of how we used to have to do this. We have the start line out in Staten Island on the other side of the Verrazano Bridge. There we have a building, a rooftop in the Bay Ridge section of Brooklyn. We also have the Bloomberg building on the east side of the park, which I think is 59th and Lex, if I remember correctly. And then what's listed there is HD1 is CP's vehicle of choice for this particular marathon. We now have a new flagship called HD21. All of these communications used to have to go back and forth via, you can see these PCOM links. These were wireless links that we would have to shoot from the start line to Bay Ridge, and then Bay Ridge would then shoot to Bloomberg, and then Bloomberg would then shoot down into the park to HD21. The problem with a lot of this is just time. This is a very, very time consuming and costly way of doing it. We've been on various rooftops as the years have gone on. For the most part, we used the Bloomberg rooftop for a while. We've also used GM. We've utilized the Condé Nast building, the Empire State building as time has gone on. So depending on what the availability is of the roof, how much money they wanted to get up there, whether the client was willing to pay for that. And then that all determined manpower, how much power was on the roof is a huge concern, because when you're talking about all these channels, these amplifiers, high wattage amplifiers, there's a big power concern. So these are just some pictures that we had of some of the rooftops when we did more traditional comms. You can see the large amplifiers in there, in the silver, and then the regular repeaters. We'd have to run these to get 20 watts per channel to cover citywide radios. Those amplifiers have to be a few hundred watts, requiring a significant amount of power. And then after that, a significant amount of LMR and cabling to get up to a lot of these rooftops. Some of these rooftops were set down below in a parapet, below the actual rooftop itself. Like Bloomberg is a solid 25, 30 feet below the edge of the roof line, where you can actually get up to the helicopter deck. So you'd have to get up there and then disperse throughout the rooftop itself. We also use the Trump building over on the east side at 48th and First one year. So it's been pretty significant, and as we've been able to go around throughout the years. So requirements for the marathon itself, we have in excess of 100 plus radios that would get given out throughout the city. There's not only the start line, the finish line, all the spotters throughout the course. There's ENG sites that happen throughout the course that are then all brought back to the finish line itself, and that's where all these people would have to communicate back to the finish line. Now, part of this transition, which I'll get into a little bit later, was the shrinking of the start line and the building up of the finish line. They used to be their own independent television productions, but then were shrunk down so that the start line actually became a REMI to the finish line. That's one of the reasons why we went, one of the driving forces behind this as well. We would have talent citywide IFBs, because on the back of our smart cars, which you can see the picture of here in the corner, we'd have a camera operator, as well as we'd have a talent reporter that'd be driving around with the car. The car also would contain a driver and a CP technician. We had a helo that we'd have to worry about. You'd have the local ENG sites, because of the amount of spectrum we would utilize in the T-band spectrum. The local ENG sites, local start line and local finish line radios would all, we would try to utilize 450, 455 pairs as best we could. We developed in-house, a voted radio receive system over via RSSI over throughout the city. So all the various rooftops would have receives, and then all of that would culminate and get voted through some computer processing back to one receive at the finish line. All this obviously required a lot of STA. I mentioned our ultimate output was about 20 watts per channel, but it required several hundred watts before the combining, the filtering, the cable loss, the antennas, everything else. The rooftops required a significant amount of power. We'd also, a lot of the rooftops being unionized and stuff, we would be required to have loaders on and off the sites, and then we would just have a limited number of manpower to work on the sites while we were up there. And then this method does work, and it worked really well for many, many years, but it does come at a cost. This is a sample of an IAS report that we ran to cover everything in the city. So you can see it's pretty full between 450, 455s, a lot of T-band, and all the various things throughout the city. So one of the driving forces behind us switching to Unity was the fact that the client came to us and said that they want to cut costs. They want to be able to shrink their bottom line. So over the years, CP had been testing some bonded cellular equipment. We got to the point where we were very comfortable with it, and we made the switch over to bonded cellular for all the video within the system. So that made a change. Well, no longer we don't need the rooftops anymore for traditional microwave receive. So how are we going to do communications throughout the rest of the city? That's where Unity came into play. So a lot of the benefits that Unity brought to us were the sheer cost of setup decreased significantly. We no longer needed the rooftops, so we no longer had to take on that expense. We no longer needed the loaders in and out the manpower. That was a cut expense. Our 3 to 4 days of setup on these rooftops, loading in, loading out, all that got cut down because in the shop, we can preload all this equipment. We can preload all the information. We've worked with Verizon for the past few years because of the bonded cellular side of things to get BIOS lines brought to the finish line for us. So they provide us with the public IPs that we will be getting at the finish line in advance. We can do a lot of the internal networking in the truck in advance while the truck's in the shop. All the usernames prior to the race have been predetermined. In Jess's Unity last week, he mentioned using a dynamic DNS. Peter's also mentioned this. We utilize the same product, so that way the DNS doesn't change. And then the integration of it, where we're able to bring this Mac Mini. So we went from these hundreds of pounds, thousands of pounds of amplifiers, radios, everything else, that encompasses that, and brought that down to 2 Mac Minis and a Dante virtual sound card. In the truck, we have an RTS Omnio network, so we're able to integrate the Mac Minis directly through DVS into the RTS Omnio. So we have our traditional KP panels in the truck. That particular frame is also trunked to the NEP truck. That is the finish line, the head end of the finish line. Therefore, anything is now available anywhere. And on-site, so on-site, our setup time is waiting for Verizon to bring us the fiber lines to the truck. And once we're up and running, a lot of the pre-configuration has already been taking place in the shop. We're able to just do a little bit of testing, and once we feel that the network is stable and comfortable, we deploy our Unity, and we're up and running. On the marathon, not only do we utilize the Unity servers themselves, we have 2 of them. One was split just for the spotters that travel throughout the city. Those spotters are in excess of 40 people. There's 4 different spotter channels themselves. Each one of those spotter channels covers a different grouping. So there's a men's group, there's a women's group, there's a wheelchair group. There's like special performance, what they call performance metrics groups, which are runners within the course that they're following specifically. And then all the traditional comms on top of that, where we had camera conference, where we didn't have the availability before to talk directly to a camera guy, have video talk directly to a camera operator on an ISO channel. We now have that capability. Where we went from 12 channels to having the availability of as much as we can put into the system. We also utilized the Unity Connect product. So once the start line became a remote or REMI, depending on who you talk to, or GREMI, or all the various acronyms of a remote integration, that we needed a way to connect the start line and the finish line. And that's where Unity Connect came into play. So we're able to pass the program and everything that's broadcast from here at the finish line over to the start line. They're able to marry all that with their local IFBs and their frame that's there. They had very limited trunking capability from there back to us. So they did a lot of it locally because of the shading of the cameras and QC of the microphones and everything of the talent that were there, and push that all out to the talent that were there via Unity Connect with a very low latency. So I was able to monitor both of those situations through all in one space. So I had a Unity Connect server running. And then 2 Unity Intercom servers running at the same time. Our chosen product is the Sonum XB8. We like this phone for a lot of reasons. It's military grade. It's got a very high milliamperage battery. So lasts roughly 12 hours or so, running with Unity full time. There's various headset options that we use. You have the either the traditional surveillance kit. They have this little noise canceling boom, single ear boom mic that some of the operators like. There's also a 3.5 millimeter TRRS jack there as well that you're able to just plug in a regular pair of headphones if you choose. And then there's also the high noise headsets, the over the ears, behind the head type style, which in our case, that style works for the bicycle riders, for the spotters that ride alongside of a lot of the people throughout the city. Within the Sonum phone itself, we sent a few down to the Unity folks at their headquarters. They were able to integrate a lot of the PTT features in the phone itself, which is really, really nice. On the left-hand side of the phone, if you're looking at the screen, so it'd be the second little piece coming in, at the very top, there's a very large talk button. So very similar to a two-way radio. If you were to squeeze that with your 2 fingers, that would activate the center talk button, just as if you were talking on a two-way radio. And on the right side of the phone, underneath of the multi-pin connector, which is one of the other reasons we like this phone, as opposed to a standard, TRRS or something like that, or a lightning plug, this particular headset has a multi-pin connector that screws and locks into place. That yellow button that's there is a PTT assignable button. So as Jess went through last week when he went through his Unity demo, that now can be an ISO channel to a solo of one of the particular channels. It could also be your main talk button if you prefer to push a button with your thumb versus your index finger, your choice. And then in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a black box. That black box is a box that CP developed itself. That's a talent pack. So that particular pack has the ability to give you local side tone, as well as marry in an MD46 or any other type of headset microphone that you might want to run for your talent, and run that through the phone. So now you get yourself locally, and you also hear any IFB return in the phone. And that gets tethered through the 3.5 millimeter jack to the Sonum. These are worn by the camera operators. These are worn by the technicians that are in the cars. They're worn by the talent that's on the cars. Like I said, they provide about 12 hours of battery life. We typically are on the air from 6 a.m. till about 2 in the afternoon or so, given a various year, depend. So we not only do the local broadcast for WABC, we also do the world feed broadcast. So we're on quite a bit of the day once we actually get running. This here is a sample of a deployment sheet that we came up with, how to track the phones, how to ID the phones, who's getting them. So if somebody were calling in and saying, hey, I'm having a problem, we were able to identify that person. So you can see here, there's 80 phones listed here. There's a couple more that I couldn't put on the screen. There's also 6 or 7 phones there in the gray in the middle that are guys out at the start line that they were utilizing their own phones for this, just downloading the client. And that makes it easy for us because we don't have to worry about sending equipment out there, because once all the runners start and leave, the start line gets to break down. Unfortunately, the finish line gets to carry the rest of the load. Here's just a quick little screenshot I had taken of the Unity Connect product in Dante Controller, of passing the microphones back and forth, crowd mics, there were program mics, there were IFB returns going back and forth. There was all various stuff going through there. So the Unity product as a whole for us has really changed the game. In terms of the New York City Marathon, we've not only used it for the New York City full marathon, we used it for the half marathon. Last year we did an ultra marathon, which was in Sacramento, California. So that this product really has made a difference for us in the New York City Marathon, in the way that they communicate. I know Jeff last week had mentioned the director talking about the sound quality. Our directors have commented on the same, saying that somebody on First Avenue sounds exactly as somebody sitting next to him in the truck, which sounds exactly as the guy that's in Brooklyn, as well as the guy that's out at the start line. Irregardless of positioning, the audio quality was there. Now, we're fortunate that in New York City, as well as Sacramento, where we did a lot of this work in these trials, that the cellular system is pretty robust. We don't have all 100 phones across one carrier. We have them split across a couple different carriers to just kind of balance out the load. They have put a cow at the start line and at the finish line in the past. We've also done some with Wi-Fi at the start line and the finish line, just to augment the cellular congestion in the two areas, the start line and the finish line. But overall, as the years have gone on, this product has gotten better and better. The initial learning curve for all of the spotters and everybody that were riding bicycles was a little bit rough. But once you teach everybody the phone, everybody's used to an electronic device or a phone or an iPad or something. Nowadays, it's pretty user-friendly and user-intuitive, and we can teach them how to utilize adjust their microphones, their volumes, their program injects. It's been really successful for us. I'm logged into our server here in New York, which I can show everybody if you want to see. So we can kind of go through this a little bit. This is a server that lives in New York, that lives in our shop. We use it for a test bed as we're testing for marathons and other various things. And if we're sending phones out, we utilize this to do that. So your initial setup is here. As Jeff had mentioned, your default port is 20101. So making sure that your network port is open and able to receive traffic. And 20102 is the same for the Unity Connect. So if you want to utilize either one of those products, just make sure that those port numbers are open in your network. In this case, our network interface is the main Ethernet on the Mac Mini, and then we utilize Dante Virtual Sound Card through an adapter that passes it out into our Dante network. Adding channels are very simple. In here, you have to have a minimum of 6 channels in the system, because that's what your window sees initially. Not everybody has to have access to all those 6 channels, but those 6 channels are there. You don't have to utilize all 6 channels, but all 6 channels are there. If you want to add a channel, it's very simple. Just add a channel in here. Call it audio. The abbreviation is what you would see on the phone itself in the client. And then you want to choose what your input and your output numbers are going to be utilized. You can split them. You can use them as a pair. Your choice, however you want to utilize them. Obviously, numerical order is always much more troubleshooting friendly. So this relates to your Dante Virtual Sound Card. So however you have your Dante Virtual Sound Card split up, whether you're only using 8x8, 16x16, 32x32, or all the way up to 64, this directly correlates to that. So now we've created our audio channel. If we want to go into a groups, we can you can change a group name, you can add a group name. Within the client itself, we do give some of the administrators the access to all of the groups. A lot of the people only have access to a specific spotter group, so that way they have their one channel that they have to talk on, and that's it. Or you can make custom groups depending on, some tech managers want to see some specific things. You make customized groups too. Your choice. It's the beauty of the system being so user friendly that you have the ability to be flexible on however you want to how you want to create that. All you do is you add a group here, like the plus sign. We'll call it our test group. Maybe we just want to call it audio. It shows up in the window here in alphabetical order. So it may not be in the order that you put it in the channels. It just shows up in alphabetical order here in the drop-down menu. Now, if we go to users, this is where you would enter all your users. These are a lot of our personnel in-house. Sometimes we utilize this to speak between our shops as a test bed. Like I said, various things. Sometimes we're testing marathons and stuff out of our New York shop. Sometimes it's coming out of our Florida shop. So depending on, we give everybody enough logins to be able to log in from either place. It doesn't matter. So you would then come over here to your groups. You want to go to our test group. We would just access whomever wanted access to that. So that would be, now I'm a talker and a listener. I see this group, and then I would also, in the CP Comms group, see myself here. We have some clients that utilize, some of the people that are in the truck, they utilize the desktop client for this as well, which you can certainly utilize. You don't have to use the iOS or the Android client, but there are desktop clients, and they wear a headset or integrate it through Bluetooth or their earphones or any of that kind of stuff as well. This overall has been a really, really successful run for us over the last 2 to 3 years. As the system has grown and people have become more and more comfortable with it, it's really, really worked out well.
I had a quick question.
Sure.
When you have a channel listening in a group and you go to another group, do you stop hearing the first channel on the, you can't hear between groups, or only one group channel at a time, right?
Correct. You only hear what is active on your screen at one time.
So, but if you put audio on both groups, the same channel, you have to have the listen on both.
Correct.
It won't stay on when you go to the next screen. Okay.
In the phone itself, you have the constant talk mode. I know Jesse's Unity last week, he had said that he'd never seen anybody utilize that. For us, we utilize it with the talent pack. So that way the talent pack, it's always transmitting, and we put the talent pack as an inline mute button. So the talent can put themselves on and off the air, but there's always a stream going through. So Jess, there's a use for your constant talk button. So I guess at this point, I'm open to any questions. If anybody's got questions, we want to chat about anything about the system, really. If anybody's got anything that they want to hear about.
When the intercom channels that you interfaced were all coming in on Dante from the Atom system?
Correct. So the truck has 2 Omnio cards in it. The Omnio cards then interface one to each server that we are running there. And then I would point the Unity Connect to a Matty box, which would be talking to the interface into the NEP truck. So that's how the audio would get back and forth. But all the comms was done on Omnio, back and forth between our frame and the 2 servers. And then our frame was then trunked to NEP. So now anything was available anywhere.
And where was the Unity Connect getting its Dante? Was that you had a laptop running with Dante on it, or with Dante controller, or what?
No, I had a separate Mac Mini, and the only thing that was running on it was Unity Connect. So it had one at the start line, one at the finish line. And then at the start line, the Unity Connect Mini, Mac Mini would then talk to another Dante network that was local on that side. That would also talk to a Matty device on that side, which went into the NEP truck at the start line. So we had Matty, we were Matty audio-wise between NEP and us on both ends. And then all the comms were on Omnio.
Jason Glass asked, do you have any glitches when clients pass from radio cell to radio cell, or is that, I mean, we don't really hear glitches as we talk on a telephone, but this is running on the data network. So do you hear any glitches at all?
No, it's been pretty, the only glitch that we've run across is if you're trying to do a handoff from Wi-Fi to cellular. In the phone, in the Wi-Fi mode, it really tries to hold on to the Wi-Fi as long as it possibly can before it transitions over to the cellular. That's really the only place when we tried to augment a couple places with Wi-Fi. We've actually found much better success with it running straight through on the cellular network. I also deployed this last year at the US Tennis Open. We had a group of radio folks that wanted to basically go everywhere on the grounds of the US Open. And it worked really, really well. So I see another question here. Okay, you're really amazed with the Unity Connect capabilities. Wanted to know if you get a license per computer. Yes, you do get a Unity Connect license per computer. Jess would know more about the numbers than I would, but yes, you do get a license per computer itself. It lives with the server.
The license for that Unity Connect, how do you move it to another computer? Is there an option to disconnect it from the license and then you put the software on another computer and then you relicense it with the same number?
You know, that's something I'm going to have to default to Jesse on. I'm not really sure about that.
I mean, the obvious need for that is, what if a computer fails and you have to move the software to another computer?
Right.
So
I certainly could see the use for it.
what do you think, Jess?
The answer is yes. You can transfer licenses from one computer to another by deactivating the first server, if you will, and activating the second one with that license.
Okay, that makes sense. Lauren Sherman, of course, wants to have his password. So if you can just tell us the password, we won't listen. That's okay. James Wilkins is asking, how is the bonded cellular used in this system?
Sure. So there's one of two ways. The bonded cellular is strictly the video side of it for this portion. In this particular event, it will take an embedded audio signal. So we do back up the Unity with the embedded audio. But for the most part, the bonded cellular portion of this is strictly the video portion of it. The way our bonded cellular works, it goes out across multiple carriers at the same time. So you're not always relying upon one carrier through the bonded cellular. So you're not overloading one system.
So if you'll do different carriers from the same bonded cellular site, like a car will have 3 different carriers on the same
So
video
yes,
signal?
our bonded cellular units have 8 SIM cards in it, split across all the major carriers. So the system sends out bits and pieces across all the networks at the same time, and then the decoders will go out and pull all that information, pull it back, and rebuild the image with error correction. So the latency on that is about 1.8 seconds or so.
Unity Connect.
So the reason we went with the Unity product on the talent side of things, our talent is very rarely seen on camera. And we wanted to be able to have a two-way conversation essentially in real time. So
Now
that's where the talent came into play.
Okay. Steve Wojtak is asking, do only the servers need licensing? Or do the phones need licensing also? Or is the username and password in the server the only access to a phone and they don't need licensing? Is that right?
Right. So all the licensing is tied to the server. You buy the initial server license itself, and then there's upgrades to that as well, including the tally feature, the external audio feature. There's a base license, and then you can all the add-ons. And then the user licenses, it comes with a very specific number of licenses. I think it's 3 or 5. Jesse probably could correct me there.
As a start license, you mean 3?
Yes. Yeah, it comes with 3 as your base then, and then you can buy them as individuals. You can buy them in groups. You can sub 3, 5, 10. I believe are the pairings, and you can the more you buy in one grouping, the more cost effective they are. But everything is tied to the server itself. So anybody can go download the client for your phone or for your computer. You just need a login to a specific server, which would have to be off of somebody that had previously purchased a license.
When Jeff Jones wants to know, what if your computer with Unity Connect crashes and you can't get to the software to deactivate it? Can you put the software on another computer and deactivate it from that other computer before you relicense it, or how do you deal with that?
You know, I haven't run into that problem yet. I'm reading your question here. My guess would be you'd have to either, when you purchase the product, they send you the serial number and your license key. So my guess is you would probably have to put that license key into the new computer.
But the old computer, if it's turned off, because it's am I right in it's checking back with Unity to see if that Unity Connect is licensed properly. So if you actually have it turned off, it doesn't even know it exists.
Correct.
Okay, so it doesn't really matter. You can't.
As long as both don't try to exist at the same time.
Right. Okay. Rajan asked another question. How would you get Unity Connect over the public internet?
So it depends on how your network settings are. You know what, like in this scenario, we're able to create through Verizon. We're able to create a private pipeline back and forth between the start line and the finish line. You can do it if you're going over the public internet. You just need your public IP, whatever your computer's public IP address is, and then making sure that your 201.02 port is open to be able to pass all the TCP and the UDP traffic that'll go back and forth.
Will DYN, go ahead, Jess.
If I can add something to that,
Please.
Connect product and the Unity Intercom have to have static IPs. The clients can run over public internet without static IP.
Gotcha.
Now, does Connect use DYN DNS
Yes.
as well?
Yes.
Okay, if you what their DYN DNS is a separate service from Unity that is a service you pay for that will give you a URL to use, and on their server, they will keep track of that URL, and you put their software on your computer where your server is located, and it figures out what the eventual public IP is for that computer, even if it's behind a NAT, and then tells their servers where it is, and that becomes the way to find it.
Okay, if I may interject for a second,
Please go ahead, Jeff.
the DYN DNS system is in no way related to Unity. It's a
Yeah, that's
separate.
what I said.
I didn't get you. It's a separate company. There's a I believe it's $30 a year, which allows you to have up to 30 separate DYN addresses. And basically, if you sign on from a new location, let's say you're in California today and tomorrow you're in New York City, and you want to get that static IP registered through the DYN DNS, they have a little utility called Update DYN DNS. You log on to that, you click on the new address, and then it automatically goes, and every time someone looks up or types in like cp.dyndns.com, it goes to its lookup table and automatically sets up the proper address.
Jeff, go ahead.
The other thing I wanted to add, you were talking about clients a couple of minutes ago and the number of clients. When, let's just say you purchase a server, which includes 3 licenses. Those licenses are not devoted to 3 users. Let's say you have Brian, Mike, and Jess, and you're using it today with those 3 users. Within the server, there is an enable button. So you can disable those 3 users after today, and tomorrow you could have, let's say, Fernando, Doug, and Peter as those 3 users.
So even though you have a license for only the initial 3, you can set up as many accounts as you want, but you can only have 3 turned on at a time.
Right, unless, of course, like Brian said, you increase the number of clients
Right.
purchasing that through the server.
Now, can you purchase clients for a short period of time, like rent them, or do you just buy them?
Unity does have a cloud service feature. The downside of it is you cannot inject any audio into it.
Oh, you have to use their server, is what you're saying.
Right.
Okay.
I also have a server at my office whereby it can be utilized by anyone. And yes, there is a slight charge to use those extra people, extra clients.
Got it. Jeff Cohen asked about Unity Connect. Can it be operated as a standalone audio over IP device connect to connect? Well, first of all, that's the way it works anyway. You have to have 2 copies of Unity Connect, 1 on each computer. That's as many as it can talk to you. Can't do 1 to many. It's just 1 connection. And the original reason it was designed was to provide a 64 4-wire ports that can be transmitted in perfect sync. So it's an ideal Dante connection between 2 different places of the country, because Dante can't travel over the public internet and keep everything all together. So you just put each of these programs on your Dante computers, send the 64 channels of 4-wire in, and what it does is it gets all 64 channels together and puts them all in one packet and sends that one packet to the other end all at the same time. So yes, you can use it alone by itself as an audio transport. Doesn't have to be 4-wire, can be one way. I've heard of it used in audio recording studios where they want to connect a bunch of microphones to another studio to use the mics in one studio in their recording in the first studio. And because they're all in sync, the recording doesn't have issues.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool product, and it's not only one-to-one like Peter's mentioning. You know, you can have a head end, you know, one of the major networks, somebody, and then all the satellites out from that up to 64. You can then branch out on a channel by channel basis from your main head end back and forth to all your different sites. Obviously, each one of those particular sites then would have to have a Unity Connect server running that then they'd be able to decode the audio.
And that is programmed basically the same way you would program RTS's trunking.
Which is, can you describe that?
Me?
RTS is trunking.
Okay, in RTS's trunking, you set up if you will, a transmitter and a receiver, or a location 1 and a location 2, and connect them via IP.
Actually, I think I probably have a Connect running right here. I can.
Yeah, I have one too, Peter. If you can't get
I
to
got it right here. Here we go. So I have here Unity Connect running underneath this Dyn updater. And it has 2 different directions in it, this direction and that direction. And in one, you name the channel, and in the other, you receive the channel. So this is what I call server to connect. And this one right here, I call connect to server. And once you name the channels, like here, the channels are named, once you connect to the other end, it will take those names and propagate them to the other end.
Right.
And also, Pete, if you look at the very bottom of the screen, if one gets confused, you will see that it says remote Unity Connect to local server.
Right. Yeah. Now, in this particular case, because I have my server, this is the same server that you saw running, only has 10 clients on it. And on the same computer, I have the Unity Connect. Well, there's no elegant way to actually connect this audio with this audio. So I had to use a separate device program from another company called Loopback, which allows you to actually create a patch between your devices. So here I have Connect to server set up, and it has channels 1 and 2 going to 1 and 2 of the output. And then on server to connect, I did the exact opposite. So this is another device, not by Unity, called Loopback. And you don't have, I could also open up a copy of a music playback program, and route the audio from that into channels of whatever. It's a clever device just to connect patch inside your computer.
Right now, just keep in mind that you are limited to your 64 channels overall by the Dante Virtual Sound Card. So how that gets split across your Unity Intercom and your Unity Connect, you still only have 64 channels to work with. So if you need more than that, obviously you just need to keep that in mind. You have to split to another server.
If we can step back just about 2 minutes, there was a question about if your Mac Mini crashes, what
Okay.
you you could open up the program on the new server, if you will, and there is an option to transfer licenses from another server function, in which case you could then add that license number. The other thing that wasn't brought up is that both Connect and the Unity Intercom on the top right menu have a feature whereby you can save your configurations.
Right.
So if you just like you would normally back up a trunking file or a AZ edit file or whatever, every once in a while, you could go in there, save it to a thumb drive, throw it into the second or backup machine, load it, and you'd be ready to rock and roll. And you
It's
have
a,
it. Yes.
it's a little confusing because it's in the menus, the little tiny menus that appear at the top edge of your Mac screen. It's not in the menus that are the normal program kind of medals over on the left-hand side. So if you pull down the menu that has to do with Connect, it tells you, about it. It's, it's basically the menu you use at. And this is where also you would click on to check for software updates on this screen. So that's just a little difference in the way they're programmed. We do have another question about, where did it go to here? Jeff Cohen says, oh, we can go that. Will virtual audio cable for Windows work? I do not know that program, but I'm sure there are other programs that are for connecting devices in there, devices in your computer. This particular program is a Mac program for Mac computers. And since the server and the Unity Connect have to be run on Mac machines, that's the one we use. But you're talking about for Windows. I'm sure there are other ones that will do that. Those two programs, by the way, Unity Connect and Unity Intercom, are totally two separate devices. And as I showed you before, I connected them using the third-party system in the same computer to connect the audio ins and outs. But I could put Unity Server on a computer with a D to A converter on the connected to on the output of it, and it could connect to another computer with a Dante in it that was taking feeds from several other different computers, but you'd have to have a D to A or a D to D version of getting between the computers.
Or Dante.
The other
Right.
way to
Right.
flip around this is, let's say you have an incoming feed via Connect, and you route that directly into your computer via a MADI card, for example. You could then take that route and put it into the same PL as a channel from another server, if you will, or another Connect.
Yeah.
And then we talk to each other.
Yeah.
It's sort of down and dirty method, but it's very quick.
Dante virtual sound card. I am not terribly familiar with that. Is either of you use that to connect to the Unity server?
That's how I utilize Dante Virtual Sound Card to talk to. That's how I branch out through the Dante network into the Omnio cards and stuff like that.
Okay,
both
so
of these
that's
programs utilize this.
your Dante on the computer. It comes through virtual sound card. Okay.
Correct. So the trying to think of the best way. So virtual sound card, you only have one virtual sound card license per computer. So
Right.
and both of these programs are looking to use the same system. So that's kind of how you were able to get around with the loopback, because you're doing that without involving the Dante virtual sound card, because you're not trying to.
Oh, there's no Dante in there at all. Right. Exactly.
Right. Now you could, depending on how you break your channels apart with Unity Connect and Unity Server, you could pass some of the channels back through in Dante Controller. You could reroute a couple things that way if you needed to, but then you're just eating up channels on your virtual sound card.
Daniel Biser, B-I-S-E-R, says, how does UniConnect compare to Dante Domain Manager? Well, they're totally two different programs for different purposes.
Right.
Dante Domain Manager allows you to set all the cross points and routing within the Dante universe, and Unity Connect is a software which will allow you to take your critical Dante signal and transmit it over the public internet to another location, which you can't do with a network of Dante to transfer. Where Dante will work within your own facility and with your own local network, but not over the public internet.
Some good questions.
Here's a note from Daniel again. He says, oh, well, it will go. Yeah, Dante will work over a WAN, but that's not the public internet.
Right.
Right. I think part of this is that using Unity Connect, I think in my mind, I've always thought of it as more of a device, even though it's running on the computer. I think of it more as an audio I/O device, and it plays a few roles. It's an audio router, but it's also that interface that, like you said, Pete, gives you that on and off ramp to the public internet. That yes, you could do that with Dante, but again, same thing. You're going to need a device. You're going to need different rights, different management. I think especially when we're talking about networks, you know, and again, dedicated audio transport. You know, much of this, like in Brian's presentation here, was about a very not that it can't be used in a one-to-many, but in your example here, a lot of times we're using Connect to get us to a frame, whether that's RTS, whether that's Readle, whoever, Clearcom. We're trying to move these PL circuits or these point-to-points, and that's one of the things I think that makes this a really elegant solution in many ways, because even though it is another device or another software layer, it's built to navigate natively the internet. And I think that's the whole point we were talking about today, is that this is that explosion of how do I leverage the public highway, right? You know, we're not talking about using, you know, private roads or this or that. We're saying, hey, I want to get on the highway. I need to go and I need to get off and I need to get back on somewhere, right? And that's, I think, the power of both the Unity products and this idea in general. Brian, I'll tell you what, watching your presentation there, I was amazed when you think about the scale, just the radios, the management you had going on. Not that this doesn't have a level of difficulty to itself, but when I saw how it started to unify, not to be, you know, I guess I'm playing off the name, but I don't
All
mean to
pun
say that, but
intended.
yeah, all puns intended here. It becomes much more straightforward when you start to think about what I'm moving where and how, you know, and you're in sharing that. I feel really, you know, that you guys are unique. CP Communications has always been a leader when it comes to RF, when it comes to applications. If you think out of the norm applications, CP is one of the first that comes top of my head, right? If whatever that is, you know, if I'm thinking hot rods, I'm thinking CP, right? And if I'm thinking unique solutions, I'm thinking CP. And thanks for sharing that, because a lot of companies would be very hesitant to do that, and we really appreciate that, because just myself, I'm already thinking through projects that I know are going to come back after this, and it's like, wow, here's an application this would fit perfect for, you know, that whole idea, bring your own device to work, right? I mean,
Right.
this is going to I mean, that's what we're doing right now. Everybody brought their devices home and they're working, right? And this
Right,
is just an
right.
extension of that. Obviously, what you were doing with the accessories, I love that. Purpose-built things. You took an off-the-shelf idea, kind of like the old days of the Kelly Johnson rules over at Lockheed. You know, when they were building the various projects, his whole thing was grab stuff that's off the shelf, build from there. You look at those connectors; they're robust. You look at the each of the mic, the handset, it's intended to be used. It's intended to be,
Right.
more importantly, it's intended to be abused, right?
Right.
And yeah, now can I grab my iPhone and get on? Absolutely. And that's the beauty of it, right? In an emergency, here you go, join in. But
Right. Once
Pete,
you tell somebody, you know, any of these people that are more familiar in the iPad generation, you know, touch screens and everything else, and be like, oh, just put your AirPods in, put this in, just type in this code, and they get it, and it's that user friendly. They pick it up really, really quickly.
right. I do want to, Pete, I do have one question that I think just came in. If you could take a look, because I don't know that, and Brian, if we touched on this, I wouldn't mind just, you know, clarifying this, because this is one of those questions I always have in my own mind. Would you mind just, you know, does the Unity server need to be located where the audio IO is, right? This is that question that always comes
So,
up.
so this all depends on a couple of factors. Your networking, your initial network. Do you have access at your site to a static public IP to be able to do this? Are those ports going to be open in that network? Are you in a ballroom where you've got to get a hold of a third-party IT person, you know, because somebody else designed the system that's in-house? For us, we control our network. It makes it easier for us to have it locally. I know Peter runs his server locally at home. We could also do the same thing, like the server that I have in the shop that we use as a test bed. I could take the Unity Connect product, bring the Unity Connect product to site, bring all my 64 channels of audio back over the public internet through TeamViewer, through remote desktop. However, I could then log back into my server in my office and then make all my channels and do my distribution from there. So it does not necessarily have to live where your audio lives. It's all based upon really what your network connectivity is on your site. Do you have the ability to get to the public internet with a static public IP address? Or do you have a static public IP that then you're behind a network that you're controlling that you can reroute the traffic?
When I first started playing with Unity years ago, I realized right away, I got out on a site and I said, okay, let me just go set it up and see how it's going to work. Well, I realized right away I had no contact with the local IT people in the hotel. And if you, it's very rare that you'll find a hotel that has IT people that have the ability to open and close ports and that sort of thing. So I immediately decided I was going to run it on my own network at home, and that's the one that I have showed on the bottom there. And I used Unity Connect to remotely tie that in, because on my access point, my FiOS access point, I was able to log in and open 201.01 and 201.02, and it's a FiOS connection, so I have 200 gigabit up and down, so I'm not worried about bandwidth. And it's worked great from home, and I run that remotely. Now, I did find an instance where I was at a show and I needed to use Unity Intercom, and for some reason, I couldn't log on to my home phone over TeamViewer. It wouldn't let me connect. So I had to take a demo copy of Unity Server, which anybody could download and use for a day or two, and put it on a local computer. And this was a gamers convention where they had gotten a credible possibility of an active shooter, and the police department wanted to have a live microphone that worked in the facility and outside the facility, going through the whole PA system. So literally, when we were asked to do this, I immediately texted the IT department we had on our show. I said, I need a public IP. I need to have these ports opened, and I'm going to put this on the network right where I am. So put it on the router that's right next to me. And I talked to John Steiner, the house PA guy. He said, I need to have an access to the PA, and I'm going to go into this port on your Dante system. And less than 5 minutes after this was all asked, I had this actual phone right here set, so I could push this button and talk with full bandwidth audio through the house PA. And it was a great solution. Unfortunately, nobody in the production team had the guts to talk through the PA and said, run for your life. So we actually didn't use it, but it worked
Now, that's
great.
a good thing.
Exactly.
This is when we like not using our future features. And Brian, if you look on the Q&A real quick, I think this is just an extension of this question that, and I think we probably answer this, but this is where it's kind of, I liked your the point of saying, where is my IP connection? And then Andrew, is pointing out, do you need to use another transport program like Unity Connect, right? And so that the answer would be yes, right? We're moving from here to here, and it's interesting. Your question is, well, it's not necessarily always where the audio connection is. The network connection is really first and foremost. Then, where do I get my audio?
Correct. Yeah,
so
you can utilize a barracks box. You can use, they have a lot of there's a lot of different companies that do audio over IP. You can utilize any one of those products, so long as you can that product is integrated back to your server wherever your server may live.
Right.
Justin Herminghouse asked about GPIO and IN. I know I have never used it because I don't have any need of it, but how do you interface GPIO and IN to the server?
Okay, there are many black boxes out there, if you will, which are GPIO in and outs, which will interface into your computer. Once they're plugged in, they're automatically seen by Unity products.
So they plug into the USB plug or something like that? Is it just like a relay box?
Yes.
Okay.
And then from the GPIO page, you can assign whatever tally number you want.
Okay. Okay.
You want it to be. And then down below, you'll see that there's 128 little white dots. Once it's connected, you'll see it there.
Justin points out that the Advantech Atom-6260 is a 6-channel relay model that he has used. One of the great bosses of CP Communications, Michael Mason, asked, what kind of latency are you seeing through these systems and how that might affect show calling? Well, I can answer that. I don't perceive any latency that would substantially delay a go queue. It's the same as a telephone, a call-in telephone. If you have two people talking on a phone right next to each other, you can detect it you're not really in sync. It's like a little echo, but it's not like the signal is coming through 3 seconds later. It's really a live event. In fact, in Jess's work with PD Live, where he has 8 different cities all over the United States running Unity Connect for the production crews in the cities, eventually, recently, the director asked the studio, which was on the other side of the wall from where he is, he asked that all the cameras in the studio be switched over to Unity Intercom because the quality of the Unity Intercom was so much better than his connection to Denver or his connection to Boston. And that's a wired BP325 and camera headsets that just were not as good a quality as a direct connect. So if that's good enough for a director to call shows, it ought to be no appreciable latency.
Now, and you know what's interesting, if you go back to our very first episode, which feels like weeks and weeks and weeks ago, but it was just a mere 10 days ago, we were talking about live streaming and audio and communications and the difficulty in getting a POTS line, right?
Yeah.
The idea, man, I could grab a JK or a Telos and just get myself a connection. You know, Telos Link, you know, that was my like go-to. If you can get me a phone line, I'll get you in the PL, right? And now it's easier to get internet, it's easier to get broadband, and frankly, for a couple channel, I mean, we learned obviously from our chat with Jess in the last session that the bandwidth requirements are so minimal on this that to bring PLs in a heartbeat. So yeah, does that mean maybe a vendor or someone is carrying a small Mac Mini, or you know, you have these licenses ready to go? Absolutely, because what a great way to queue a show remotely, to get a PL circuit back, to get audio, in fact, right? Because once we embrace the fact that PL is simply audio, used to be that we said, well, PL was band limited, right? It had less frequency response. Well, that's not an issue anymore, right? We're shipping PLs around via Dante. The limitation is that endpoint, right? Whatever it's going to come out. And so I think that's a pretty cool, you know, neat feature and opportunity we have to do. Mac, you got anything you want to throw in here?
Yeah, not specifically, but I thought your point is great, that POTS lines that we relied on forever just aren't that available anymore. I mean,
Yeah,
and my corporate client, we're running into a problem because they have their infrastructure is VoIP. Their telephone infrastructure is VoIP. But in the past, we had Teloses, which required a POTS line, and so we had an adapter to get some analog lines out of the VoIP, and the Telos is working fine. For no apparent reason, when they upgraded other studio equipment, they got rid of the Teloses and they put in some more modern, actually they put in innkeepers. And as it turns out, innkeepers don't work very well on POTS lines that have started out as VoIP lines. It's
yeah, it's kind of like MP to wave, back to MP3, back to wave, back to MP3.
What it tells us, when I looked at the return from a phone line that I'm sending a mix minus to, there was no input on that phone line when I was sending, from the studio. Now, because they're all expecting different kinds of services, I'm getting full meter movement on the returns from the innkeeper on my outbound signal. And we're in the middle of dealing about that with JK now. We may just send those back and get their VoIP interfaces and get rid of our
right.
POTS lines.
And that native, right?
Yeah,
go native,
and
that's VoIP.
That's what there is, and VoIP is the network.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And you know, again, we talked about in that first episode the importance of number one, embracing IT. You know, it's just if you don't like IP, then now is the time to strategically find a new job.
Find a new
Okay.
job.
You don't have to love it, you don't have to like it, but you better embrace it and you better give it the biggest bear hug you can do, because that is where our industry is going. That's where our industry's at, but it's only going to accelerate, right? We were touching on SMPTE 2110. So, you know, it's life, folks. All
Right.
right. So figure it out, like it, love it, embrace it, but also what would I rather ask an IT manager for? Would I rather go to them and say, hey, I need all this help setting up a bunch of SIPs? Or do I want to just say, hey, can you help me out? I need to get to the internet here. I need a port open.
Right.
What can we do? Right.
Yeah.
And that's where Unity steps in, right? In these kind of products where it's like, look, I don't need very much help. I just need can you open the door here?
Right.
As long as I can get out, I'm good.
Yeah.
So
I've seen a couple more questions here, guys, too.
yeah, jump right in.
Someone said, James Wilkins asked about Wi-Fi versus cellular. Is it true that it's Wi-Fi is okay for Unity? I've used it on both Wi-Fi and cellular. Haven't had a problem. There's a little bit of a lag in the handoff in the transition, but that can be adjusted in your audio buffer as well.
Going between Wi-Fi and cellular, right? When you're
Correct.
roaming, basically, right?
Right. Once you're on Wi-Fi, it really likes to stay on Wi-Fi, and it holds on to it really long, longer than it should. So
Okay.
there is that little bit of a handoff, but other than that, it works on both Wi-Fi or cellular equally. Mitchell Boyce asked about a primary and backup server, and if so, what's the failover and delay, if any? So I don't personally know. Jess probably could attest to this, but I don't know of a way to be able to have two people logged into a primary and a backup server. I think you would need to have your configuration cloned on one server and the other. You can have them both running at the same time. My suggestion would be utilizing something like the Dyn DNS that we've mentioned a whole bunch of times here, where then all you have to do is go in the Dyn DNS and tell people, hey, your login transitions over to this IP address now. And then it's universal across the board. So you don't have to have everybody go into their settings on their initial page and say, oh, I need to go to this IP address now. It does it automatically. And if you have the reconnect feature activated, the phone will just do it automatically once that new server is established. I don't know if Jesse's still with us, but he might be able to attest to that better.
No, I agree with you. That's probably the easiest way to go. We have discussed how to do an automatic swap over, and to say the least, it's extremely difficult to build that software, on the verge of impossible. Our programmer is, as we mentioned in the last session we did, our programmer is one of the guys who wrote the take a picture of your check and deposit it in the bank. So the man is not, a hack programmer. He fully knows and understands everything the system can do. And if he can't do it, I seriously doubt there's anyone else in the country that can do it, or in the world for that matter.
There was a question from Mark Herring about having trouble logging in, but he doesn't have an account anywhere. Well, I put in the chat portion of this webinar the login to my server. There's only 3 ports there you can use, but also Jess Heimlich has a demo server, and he can share the login for that. Maybe you can type that into the chat section, Jess, of your down on the bottom there. He has a
Okay.
lot more. He has a lot more ports available.
And of course, we're going to be sharing, we shared our emails at the beginning of this. Both Brian and Jess's emails are up there. Obviously, if you want to demo some things, Jess's, with that server, as Pete mentioned, has some opportunities there. Let's see, any other notes that you guys want to address?
You know, there was one thing which I think should have been said right at the top of this show. Unity Intercom is full duplex. Walkie-talkies are half duplex. That's a huge difference in making things run smoothly. And you know, if you've ever tried to even do a load in with a walkie-talkie, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Where are you? Can you hear me? You got cut off. And that doesn't happen with Unity Intercom because it's full duplex, just like talking on a telephone.
Somebody stepped on you.
Oh, sorry, I got cut off.
Yeah.
Good point. Good point. And it also doesn't put off 2 to 10 watts of RF when you walk by.
Well, there's that too. So,
And
but I,
the
but I,
lovely
but
key
I-
up.
I still wouldn't hold the
Oh, we
cell
just put
phone
it right
against
next
my
to our
head.
head now.
Exactly, exactly.
Exactly.
This part
Well,
of my
yeah.
brain is sort of fried, I'm sure.
You know what though? We all know that this is what happens with radiation. It changes your hair, does other things. Yeah. See, I mean, both Mac and Pete. Oh,
This
yeah.
was
You know,
all,
and then
this was
I
all
think
caused by Unity
that's right.
Intercom.
Me and Brian, our hair is just kind of running back. We have 2 races going on right now. Mac's race is completed. So, but you know, I think I would like to set up for our episode tomorrow. You know, the last week and a half we've been pretty audio centric, and certainly RF and comms has been first and foremost because well, that's just kind of the way it worked out.
It's what
But
we do.
tomorrow, that's kind of what we do. But we believe audio is important. But tomorrow we're going to start branching out, if you will, and we're going to have an interesting discussion with Bill Salzer from East Shore Sound and MeteorNet, and this idea of a single backbone. Brian, you alluded to it as well with video and audio being transport for your project. It's the same thing here. We're talking about really embracing, whether it's, you know, the protocol SMPTE 2110, or whether it's, you know, MeteorNet, or whether it's a Brocom, all these different product platforms that are out there right now. We're going to start seeing more and more of that convergence going on. It's not unusual to be given, hey, here's 2 strands, do everything on it, right? Well, that's not a simple task, but it's not nearly what it used to be, and that's where our discussions are going to start heading. So we'll be doing that. And then Pete, I see you have your finger up.
Brian, you said you ran 3 different servers for the marathon. Were users ever having to switch between servers with different logons? Is there any way to
No.
store that and do that?
I didn't have any. I split them up so that we had all of our Moto techs, our Moto talent, all those folks on one side, and then I had all the spotters who only needed their spotter channels and everything on the other side.
So I think Edward Wilcock was sort of saying it'd be great to have multiple logins on your first screen in case you had to log on to. Well, I mean, I would love it because just doing the show, I had to put in Jess's log on with all these complicated names and everything, and then I had to put it back to my server, and it was a lot of typing. I'd rather be able to just flip between them. So that's what I want by next week, please.
Well, I'm sorry to tell you this, Pete, but it already exists.
Is that on the client on my phone?
If on the very first screen that you come to, which is where you would put in your name and your password,
Yeah.
if you were to enter another setting, if you will, for another client,
Yeah.
once you do that, on the very top of the first page, you'll see on the top left, you'll see sort of like a circle with an arrow appear. And if you press that, it gives you a list of all servers you've contacted recently.
You know, I think you told me about this, and I think I may have an old Android version or something like that, because I didn't see that, but that's great. That's perfect.
And
Yes.
this is why we have people from the product on with us. And this is live, and this is how we work. And I think it reflects how we work in the field too. I may be wrong regularly, but I'm rarely in doubt. And I will run with confidence, regardless of the
So-
direction. That's how it works.
So that, Jess, that multiple server thing is on the Android client as well, right? Because Edward was asking about that. He doesn't seem to think it's on there either.
I believe it is. I'd have to check.
I have it on my iPhone.
We'll wait.
And
It's
there
right
you go.
That little
Okay.
guy right there.
Oh.
So if I hit that,
That's what it is. There you
up to
go.
the screen.
That's exactly. And if you were to,
Go
Brian,
ahead.
could you
Yeah, go
show
ahead.
your screen again like you did?
Sure. You want it this way or?
No, hit that top left button. And any way you can, I don't know what server you're on, but if there's any way you can keep it, your phone in that position and hit another one of the clients or one of the servers, okay, that's, yeah, my server is not up at the moment, but go back and hit like something that you're not on. You'll notice that it automatically logs you in as well. So it's a one touch.
And it's fast.
Right. And so the $1 million question is, if it's not on Android, will it be on there? We'll leave that one out there in the ether. And
Well, give me a second and I'll give you an answer to that.
the good news is we can deposit our checks. That's the good news. And you know what, that's reassuring. And that, you know, if that's not a perfect example of the world we're in now, right? Because once something's converted, we can have the best and the brightest moving bits and bytes and all of those, and megabytes and terabytes and everything in the cloud. But you know, while, you know, if Pete, do you have any closing thoughts? I know this is something you're very passionate about.
We have a question from Steve Wojtak, and since this technically isn't the manufacturer show, it's
Correct.
more like a user show, I can go ahead and ask it. Wants to know how the Unity Intercom compares to Intercom VCOM system. And functionally, they're both intercom systems, but they have totally different premises. The Unity Intercom is designed with a maximum of 6 channels on a client, but you can switch between different groups and have as many channels as you want between groups. And the intercom systems is designed to have practically as many channels as you want. NBC installed it so their tech managers could have on one iPad every studio in the NBC facility on one iPad, on one screen. I'm sure they could do it with the Unity Intercom by paging between different things.
Right.
It also is a slightly different deal with the server and the clients, but they are competing products. And I think if you look at both, you can find out how to do virtually the same thing with both. There's some things in Unity, in intercom systems that allow you to interface lots of different channels, like hardware, that kind of stuff, which it built into the single server version of the Unity Intercom, the 64 channels. So they're comparable, they just do things different ways. Got that,
Uh,
Steve?
Yes, you can have, if you purchase the enhanced users and groups, I believe you can have 64 different groups and 128 channels. And of course, you accomplish that by just scrolling through the screens, if you will.
And judging by this next question, Unity Connect is a software that is desperately needed on Windows machines. But my only solution is you really should get rid of the Windows machine and go to a Mac.
Well, if we want to get the technical answer to that, the deep inside the bowels of the Windows operating system, it does not allow you to handle audio in the same way that the Mac does. So consequently, the answer is no, you're never going to see this on Windows.
What we need to get is a program like Parallels that lets you run a Mac on your Windows machine.
Ew.
I feel dirty.
Oh, but Windows will be our
Wash
guest
my
next
hands
week.
one more time.
Exactly.
right.
Exactly.
Oh, man.
The other significant difference between VCOM and Unity Intercom is price. There is I believe Unity Intercom averages about 12 to 15% of the price of a VCOM system.
You mean it's 12 to 15% of the VCOM? Yes, it is more expensive if you want to buy the system. One thing that is doable with a VCOM system is they do have a rental system, a rental service, just like you do, but you can interface other external channels to their rental system. The other difference is that their rental system does have a very functional automatic backup switch over to another server that takes less than a couple of seconds to go from one direction to the other direction and about 5 seconds to go the original direction. So it does have the backup capability. On the show we did for a major client, we had a server in San Francisco and a server in Phoenix, and we're able to almost instantaneously switch between the servers without interrupting the client. So luckily, I know this is going to cause me problems saying this, because now I know I won't be able to deposit any checks ever anywhere, but they did it. So,
You know, and that is the platform that is Practical Show Tech. We're pretty good at pulling the pin and walking away, which I think we're pretty close to doing right now. But I hope everybody does understand our intent here is to really help people understand the strengths of products and where they fit in your workflows. And I think that's what we saw today with Unity, is some great examples of these applications. And like I said, it caused me to walk away thinking, what are some projects that I'm going to be using this on? And I came up with at least 2 or 3 atypical applications. One of those being my phone bridge replacements. And those are the opportunities we have in today. So I think, you know, unless somebody else really wants me to not hit the end button,
no, we're sort of run out of questions. There are a couple of things. There are people suggesting something called VirtualBox to run your Mac on your PC. I'm going to look into that. Not.
I've done that the other way. I've run
Right,
Windows
right,
on
right.
Mac. with
Right,
virtual.
right. So we call that boot camp, and we call that parallels, and we have a lot of options to go either way. And there's a lot out there for people that want that platform. But I would like to say that, you know, the one, Jess, you point out an excellent point. The native nature of this product, how it's built around the Mac platform. One of the benefits of that is that it brings inherent stability with that. So many times when products try to accommodate too many things, they become less reliable. You know, that's like a discussion all to itself. But anyhow, I want to say thanks to everybody. Brian, thank you for extending your time. And again,
No problem.
thanks to, oh, you're frozen. You're frozen, Pete.
I must say that even though you have to use a Mac for your server, all your clients can be on Android and Windows machines. There are
Right.
clients for any for Mac or Windows or iOS or Android.
That's a good point. And for those
Yeah.
of you running on
Yeah.
industrial shows where they're very brand sensitive, and we've all been on those before, and that's why I have the covers I have on my laptops. That's a great way to do it, because in that case, your client pleases the client, because the client can be anything that people want. And the nice thing about rack mount servers, they can be hidden. And as long as they have airflow, let me put that caveat in. You can hide them, just make sure they get airflow,
And
right?
it's not an expensive server. It's a
No,
Mac.
yeah, it's not like they're requiring you to run a Mac trash can, you know, or a new Mac Pro, you know, which I affectionately call the cheese grater.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of these systems. And so whatever suits your fancy, there's something out there. And you know, I think until tomorrow, we will call it a day.
I just want to say one thing.
Mac, yeah. And
That
Pete,
is,
can you
I
pull
thought
up the
in
contact infos?
in Brian's slide presentation there, it was stunning, the difference in hardware between when they were running off the roofs of the buildings and going over the network.
Mm-hmm.
It just, I mean, blew me away, the difference in hardware there. It was,
And the difference in load-in days and the difference
Yeah.
in, you know, you just
Scale
go out
works
there and,
both ways, right?
yeah.
and I'm sure the client was blown away with how much less money they had to spend.
Yeah, they were happy, to say the least.
And that being said, everybody should know that CP is the only major rental house with 100 of these handsets ready to go right now for your rental. So you can rent the handsets, use their server, and do a bunch of different shows.
They can fit in a
through
FedEx
CP.
box.
Yep.
We have an agreement with Jess, so we have a
Yep.
couple of servers in house. Jess is the exclusive provider for the country, but we do have an agreement between CP and Jess. So either him or us, or you know, somebody certainly can help you out.
See,
Yep.
that's the thing. Everybody's happy. I'm from Chicago, so we know all about these things. So again, thanks very much, Pete. That's a great face. And we'll see everybody. Go have a great evening, and we'll talk to you at our next webinar. So look forward to joining you. Thanks again, Brian. Thanks, Jess.
Okay.
So long.